Hello, tonight. You travel back to a world so distant that even memory itself has not yet learned how to speak. Long before emperors raised bronze banners beside the Yellow River, before walls, roads, or written prayers appear beneath the northern stars, there is only wind, water, and an endless plain of sleeping earth waiting quietly beneath the cold sky. You stand at the edge of northern China nearly 20,000 years before written history begins. Cold air drifts down from the Tibetan plateau, brushing across fresh layers of yellow sediment beside the early Yellow River. The land feels vast and unfinished, like a quiet painting abandoned beside a fading fire during a silent winter evening. Above you, pale constellations shimmer through drifting clouds of dust crossing the ancient Los Plateau. The river bends slowly through darkness, wandering across the empty land without urgency or direction. In some distant imaginary way, it resembles a modern traveler endlessly searching for stronger phone reception somewhere beyond the next lonely hillside tonight. So, before you get completely comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel, but only if you truly enjoy what we're creating here. And while the night settles quietly around you, feel free to leave a comment sharing your local time and the place from which you are listening tonight. Somewhere far away, another listener may be hearing the same river winds while rain taps softly against a completely different window. Now slowly dim the lights. Perhaps turn on a fan, letting the steady hum of the air fill the room, and in that gentle rhythm, we quietly step into tonight's journey together. The Yellow River has not yet become the cradle of dynasties. It is still young in geological terms, flowing through valleys shaped by shifting tectonic plates and long cycles of ice and thaw. Modern researchers studying sediment deposits believe the river changes direction many times across prehistoric ages, leaving behind deep blankets of fertile loess soil that will someday nourish millions of people. You walk beside the river, beneath an enormous sky untouched by smoke or crowded cities. Moonlight spreads across damp grasslands where ancient deer move slowly through drifting cold mist. Far downstream, paleontologists will someday uncover fossils near the Wei River basin, including traces of northern elephants that once wandered these surprisingly green plains during warmer climates. The earth beneath your feet feels unusually soft because loess soil forms from tiny mineral particles carried by ancient winds across centuries. Even today, northern China remains covered by these golden layers reaching extraordinary depths. The surface appears delicate and powdery, almost like flour scattered carelessly across an old wooden table before midnight baking quietly begins. The silence here feels enormous. No roads interrupt the plains. No temples rise toward the heavens. There are no kings, no borders, no written languages, and no names for the stars hanging overhead. You hear only the quiet rhythm of water touching riverbanks beneath the distant cries of migrating birds, crossing invisible pathways through the night sky. During the late Ice Age, temperatures across this region fluctuate constantly. Long cold periods give way to shorter, warmer intervals, allowing grasslands to spread and retreat across northern China like the slow breathing of the planet itself. Scientists studying pollen samples taken from ancient lake beds discover traces of grasses, shrubs, and early forests that once shaped these forgotten environments beside the river. As you continue walking through this prehistoric world, you notice how the river never truly stays still. It twists gently through the plains, carrying enormous quantities of fine yellow sediment from the plateau. Thousands of years later, historians will call it both a blessing and a burden because its floods repeatedly reshape entire regions. Tonight, though, the river feels calm, patient, and almost sleepy beneath the drifting stars. The winds descending from the Tibetan plateau travel astonishing distances before reaching these lowlands. They carry dust, moisture, and cold air across the continent in repeating seasonal cycles that continue far into the modern world. In some quiet way, the same winds brushing these ancient grasslands still move across northern China tonight. Although they now pass highways, apartment towers, and glowing convenience stores selling instant noodles at 2 in the morning. You pause beside a shallow bank where reeds bend gently beside dark water. Somewhere nearby, animals move cautiously through the grass, leaving faint tracks in wet earth that disappear again beneath fresh layers of dust. Archaeologists later discover fossilized footprints throughout parts of the Yellow River Basin, offering small glimpses into ecosystems that vanished long before written history remembers them. The night air grows colder, while thin clouds drift slowly across the moon above the silent plains. You can almost feel the ancient weight of the land surrounding you. Geological studies suggest the lowest plateau forms through countless layers of wind-blown silt, preserving climate records like pages hidden inside an endless sleeping journal beneath Earth. Far beyond the dark horizon, glaciers still hold distant mountains beneath sheets of ancient ice. Meltwater feeds narrow streams that slowly join the growing river below. The sound remains soft and steady, like water moving through hidden pipes inside an old wooden house sometime after midnight. Nature never rushes here, choosing patience instead across centuries and seasons. You slowly understand why early humans eventually settled beside rivers like this ancient one. Even before farming begins, the land offers patterns that feel calm and dependable. Animals return with changing seasons. Water flows through quiet valleys. Grasses recover after winter. Survival depends more upon careful listening than conquering the surrounding landscape completely. There is something strangely comforting about how empty the world still appears beneath pale moonlight tonight. Without crowded cities or endless noise, your attention settles naturally upon smaller details nearby. Moonlight touching moving water feels fascinating. Distant hills appear almost sacred. Even wind brushing dry grass seems worthy of quiet observation beside the sleeping earth. Slowly, the stars continue wheeling overhead while the river moves endlessly toward the distant eastern sea tonight. The lowest plains remain silent beneath drifting yellow dust, waiting patiently for future villages, future ceremonies, and future kingdoms still beyond imagination. For now there is only cold northern wind, dark water, and peaceful silence before footsteps arrive. Morning arrives slowly across the middle reaches of the Yellow River. Pale sunlight stretches over the lowest plains, touching early Yangshao settlements with long bands of gold. You stand quietly beside one small village nearly 5,000 years before the Common Era, while cold northern wind drifts softly through the open surrounding fields. The homes sit partially below ground level, shaped carefully into the earth to preserve warmth during bitter northern winters. Thick wooden posts support roofs built from branches and packed clay, while narrow entrances face away from stronger winds. From above, the village resembles shallow circles pressed gently into soft yellow soil below. Inside one home, a small fire burns steadily at the center of the floor. Smoke rises through a simple opening overhead before disappearing into the dry plateau air outside. Nearby, someone grinds millet across a flat stone with slow rhythm, sounding strangely similar to making coffee before waking completely on a quiet Monday morning. Millet becomes one of the great foundations of life beside the Yellow River. Unlike rice, which prefers warmer southern climates, millet survives well within dry northern soil. Archaeologists discover large storage pits filled with grain remains at Yangshao sites, showing these communities already understand planning and food preservation long before imperial China eventually emerges from history. You walk slowly through the village paths, noticing how carefully daily life organizes itself around cooperation rather than command. Women shape pottery beside shaded work areas, while children carry water in painted containers from nearby wells. Older villagers repair fishing nets or sharpen bone tools beneath quiet conversation. There are no palaces here, no standing armies, and no grand monuments demanding attention from the landscape. One of the most remarkable discoveries connected to Yangshao culture appears at Bampo, near modern Xi'an. Archaeologists excavating the site during the 1950s uncover semi-subterranean homes, communal storage areas, burial grounds, and beautifully painted pottery, decorated with swirling black and red patterns. Some designs resemble fish, faces, or abstract symbols, as though these early communities already feel an urge to preserve calm beauty against the passing movement of time. The pottery itself carries a quiet elegance. Bowls, jars, and vessels rest beside the fires in warm shades of red and brown, reflecting flickering light against packed earth walls. Many pieces are shaped with surprising balance and symmetry, proving that practical objects often become artistic long before societies grow wealthy. Human beings, it seems, have always enjoyed decorating ordinary life, even if the results occasionally resemble abstract modern restaurant plates. Outside the homes, the Yellow River continues its patient movement through the plains. During spring floods, the river deposits fresh layers of fertile silt across nearby fields, renewing the soil for another growing season. Yet the river also demands caution because its shifting channels can quietly erase familiar paths overnight. Life beside the Yellow River always requires attention, adaptation, and respect for forces larger than any individual settlement. As evening approaches, smoke rises from dozens of cooking fires across the village. The smell of millet porridge mixes gently with roasted roots, herbs, and river fish drying beside woven baskets. Dogs wander lazily between homes, while distant insects begin their steady chorus beneath the cooling sky. Nothing moves quickly here. The entire settlement seems to breathe at the slow and regular pace of the seasons themselves. You notice how sound behaves differently in this ancient landscape. Without engines, machines, or crowded cities, even the smallest noises travel clearly across open ground. A child laughing near the storage pits carries through the evening air. The tapping of stone tools echoes softly from one side of the village to the other. Somewhere nearby, a dog barks once before deciding further effort feels unnecessary tonight. Anthropologists studying Yangshao communities believe many villages maintain relatively balanced social structures compared to later dynastic societies. Burial evidence often reveals fewer dramatic differences in wealth or status. Although some families possess finer goods, the atmosphere still feels communal, shaped more by shared survival than strict hierarchy or obedience toward distant rulers. The northern sky darkens slowly into deep blue. One by one, stars begin appearing above the plateau, while families gather around indoor fires. Light flickers against pottery walls decorated with spirals and geometric lines that seem almost hypnotic in the dim glow. You realize these painted patterns may carry spiritual meaning, clan identity, or perhaps simple appreciation for rhythm and repetition within everyday life. Near the settlement's edge, shallow graves rest quietly beneath the cold earth. Archaeologists discover Yangshao burials often contain pottery vessels and personal belongings beside the dead. Even during these distant centuries, people seem unwilling to separate memory completely from physical objects. A painted bowl becomes companionship carried gently into the unknown beyond life. Winter nights here become intensely cold across the open northern toe after sunset. Sharp winds slip easily across empty terrain beneath dark skies. Semi-underground homes trap warmth close to the fire, while thick walls reduce exposure to icy air. Families likely sleep together beneath woven blankets, while glowing embers flicker nearby like tiny captive stars. Across many generations, villages rise and disappear beside the shifting riverbanks over time. Floods reshape the land while climate patterns change gradually across centuries. Some communities vanish entirely while others grow into larger settlements connected through trade and shared customs. Yet daily life remains familiar. Water is gathered, grain is stored, fires burn nightly beneath stars. What makes these early settlements feel peaceful is not the absence of hardship or uncertainty. The people living here understand drought, illness, floods, and bitter winters as permanent parts of existence rather than interruptions to comfort. Their world feels fragile yet grounded, like an old wooden chair creaking softly without ever fully collapsing beneath ordinary use. As midnight approaches, the village grows quiet except for insects and distant river sounds nearby. Fires burn lower inside homes, casting soft amber light against walls, darkened by years of smoke. Somewhere beyond the darkness, water brushes gently against the riverbank, while cold wind crosses the plateau exactly as it did before humanity arrives. And above the sleeping settlement beside the Yellow River, beneath stars untouched by history or empire, the first quiet fires continue glowing patiently through the night, carrying warmth, memory, and human presence into a future still far beyond imagination. Morning settles softly across the middle Yellow River Valley, where long fields of millet stretch beneath a pale gray sky that seems to blur gently into the horizon. You walk slowly along narrow dirt paths between early farming villages, listening to the steady whisper of dry grass moving beneath cool northern wind. Everything here follows patterns shaped quietly by water, weather, and returning seasons. The people living beside the river understand time differently from the modern world. Life unfolds through repeating cycles rather than strict schedules. Seeds are planted when the soil softens after winter frost. Fishing nets are repaired before spring floods arrive. Grain is stored carefully before the cold winds return from the plateau. Nobody rushes, although somewhere in the distant future, someone will absolutely invent unnecessary business meetings. Anthropologists studying early Yellow River societies often describe many communities as relatively balanced before centralized political systems emerge. Burial evidence suggests differences in wealth exist, though they remain modest beside later dynastic periods. The villages feel cooperative rather than heavily controlled, shaped mainly by practical survival and shared responsibility among neighbors. You pass older villagers sitting beside woven baskets near the edge of a quiet field. One man repairs a farming tool using polished bone attached carefully to a wooden handle with leather bindings. Another sharpens a stone blade beside the morning fire. Their movements feel slow yet practiced through generations of repetition and observation. Nearby, children carry water from a packed earth well toward the center of the settlement. Small footprints press gently into yellow soil, while clay jars sway carefully against their sides. Some laugh softly, while others focus upon balancing the containers without spilling water. The scene feels familiar, like neighbors carrying groceries before approaching rain arrives. The river moves quietly beyond the distant fields beneath the pale northern sky. During calm weather, its surface reflects muted shades of silver and gold beneath drifting clouds. Thick loess deposits continue enriching the surrounding land, allowing millet agriculture to expand steadily. Researchers believe this fertile environment supports larger settlements and increasingly stable patterns of village life. You notice how every part of the settlement remains connected closely to the surrounding landscape. Homes are built from nearby earth while cooking fires burn grasses and wood collected beside riverbanks. Pottery comes from local clay shaped by ancient floods. Human life settles gently into nature here, instead of forcing harsh control upon the land. At the center of the village, artisans sit beneath simple shade coverings while shaping painted pottery from smooth river clay. Their fingers carve swirling patterns across bowls, jars, and storage vessels with slow precision. Some markings resemble fish or flowing water, while others remain mysterious even today. Perhaps ancient artists simply enjoy decoration after long afternoons working quietly. The pottery fires burn steadily throughout the long afternoon beside the settlement. Smoke rises lazily into dry northern air while warm clay hardens beneath carefully controlled heat. Archaeologists studying Yangshao culture discover surprisingly advanced ceramic techniques across the Yellow River Basin. Certain vessels reveal remarkable symmetry and temperature control, proving somebody already appreciates perfectly organized kitchen storage. As the day continues, the fields shimmer softly beneath filtered sunlight. Millet stalks bend gently in the wind like waves crossing shallow water. Women gather harvested grain into woven baskets, while nearby families prepare evening meals beside outdoor hearths. The pace remains calm because survival depends on consistency rather than speed. Nobody benefits from panic beside a river that has flowed patiently for thousands of years. In some areas, small communal storage pits hold grain reserves protected against moisture and pests. Archaeological excavations across northern China reveal these underground pits lined carefully with compacted clay. Such structures help communities survive poor harvests and difficult winters, reducing risk through collective planning. Long before written laws appear, cooperation already functions as a quiet form of social stability. Toward evening, cool air drifts once more from the distant plateau. The sky gradually deepens into soft shades of blue-gray, while smoke from cooking fires spreads gently across the village rooftops. Dogs wander between homes, searching hopefully for scraps near the fires. One particularly determined animal follows a child carrying food with the emotional dedication of someone waiting outside a modern bakery 5 minutes before closing time. You walk beside the riverbank while insects begin their nightly chorus within the tall grasses. Water brushes softly against mud and reeds, producing a rhythm so steady that it almost feels mechanical. Yet nothing artificial exists here. The sound belongs entirely to the earth itself, repeating night after night beneath stars that ancient villagers study carefully for weather patterns and seasonal changes. Some historians believe these early communities already observed celestial movements with surprising attention. The regular return of constellations helps determine planting cycles and seasonal migration patterns for animals. Although formal astronomy has not yet emerged, the night sky already serves as both calendar and companion. People everywhere, it seems, eventually look upwards, searching for order among distant lights. Inside the homes, evening meals are shared quietly beside central fires. Millet porridge simmers in painted vessels while dried fish and gathered herbs warm slowly over stone hearths. Family members sit close together against the cooling night air, speaking softly while shadows flicker across packed earth walls. The atmosphere feels deeply grounded, shaped by routine, familiarity, and the reassuring presence of nearby voices. Outside, the Yellow River continues flowing past countless unseen villages further upstream and downstream. Some communities trade tools, pottery styles, or seeds with neighboring settlements along narrow footpaths crossing the plains. Others remain isolated for generations, yet all are connected by the same river system carrying water, fertile soil, and slow movement through northern China's vast landscape. The deeper the night becomes, the quieter the settlement grows. Cooking fires collapse gradually into glowing embers while wind moves softly through drying millet fields beneath the stars. Somewhere beyond the darkness, an owl calls briefly across the plain before silence returns once again to the sleeping village beside the river. And as the Yellow River drifts patiently through the ancient northern earth, beneath skies pale with dust and distant starlight, time itself seems to slow beneath the layers of golden sediment, resting quietly beside these early fields where human history still sleeps gently in its earliest dreams. The morning arrives quietly across the plains of ancient Shandong, where pale mist drifts low above the earth like slow-moving water suspended in the air. You stand beside one of the growing settlements of the Longshan culture around 3,000 years before the Common Era. The village feels larger than earlier communities along the Yellow River, more organized, more permanent, and slightly more aware of itself. Around the settlement, thick, rammed earth walls rise gradually from the yellow soil. Workers shape them layer by layer using compact earth compressed between wooden frames, creating barriers strong enough to endure wind, rain, and passing generations. Archaeologists studying Longshan sites believe these defensive walls mark an important transition toward increasingly complex societies. Quietly, almost invisibly, communities begin thinking about protection, territory, and organized authority. The walls themselves do not appear aggressive beneath the morning fog. Instead, they resemble extensions of the earth, blending softly into the lowest landscape surrounding the settlement. Grass grows along their edges, while narrow pathways curve gently toward guarded entrances. If you did not know their purpose, you might mistake them for low natural ridges shaped by ancient rivers rather than human intention. Inside the walls, the village wakes slowly beneath cold gray skies. Fires are lit one by one inside homes clustered around open workspaces and storage areas. Potters move carefully between kilns while smoke drifts upward in thin silver streams through the damp morning air. Somewhere nearby, a rooster calls with surprising confidence for such a small creature standing in an enormous prehistoric landscape. Longshan pottery becomes famous for its remarkable black ceramic surfaces, polished so finely that some vessels shine like dark mirrors beside the firelight. Modern archaeologists often refer to certain pieces as eggshell pottery because the walls are astonishingly thin and delicate. Holding one must have felt strangely dangerous, like carrying a bubble made from shadow and hardened smoke. You watch artisans shaping wet clay upon slow-turning surfaces using practiced movements refined patiently across generations. Their hands remain steady, while narrow bowls and elegant stemmed cups emerge gradually from spinning earth. Unlike earlier pottery styles, these vessels display refined symmetry and technical precision, suggesting growing specialization as some villagers focus mainly upon skilled craftsmanship. Some scholars believe the Longshan period reflects the early beginnings of social stratification across northern China. Burial sites reveal noticeable differences in grave goods between individuals and families. Certain tombs contain polished jade, ceremonial artifacts, and finely worked tools, while others remain modest. These distinctions spread gradually through society, like ripples crossing still water. You walk slowly beyond the settlement toward one of the burial grounds resting beneath low grassy hills. The graves appear calm and orderly beneath the pale sky. Archaeologists excavating Longshan tombs discovered jade ornaments, stone drums, and black pottery vessels placed carefully beside the dead. Even thousands of years later, these objects still seem to carry traces of quiet affection and memory. One polished jade blade catches the pale morning light beneath damp layers of earth and drifting mist. Jade already carries deep symbolic value during this era because of its rarity, durability, and translucent beauty. Later, Chinese civilizations will treasure it for thousands of years afterward. Somehow, humanity collectively decides shiny stones possess spiritual importance, and history never completely recovers afterward. Beyond the burial fields, the plains stretched endlessly beneath drifting fog. Farmers moved through millet fields carrying woven baskets, while others guide simple wooden plows across damp soil. The agricultural systems supporting these settlements become increasingly organized during the Longshan period. Larger populations require coordinated labor, seasonal planning, and improved storage methods capable of supporting communities through droughts and difficult winters. You notice how carefully water is managed throughout the growing settlement beside the river. Narrow drainage channels guide rainwater safely away from homes, while storage pits preserve harvested grain beneath packed clay seals. These practical systems reveal administrative awareness long before written bureaucracies emerge. Civilization often begins quietly through people solving ordinary seasonal problems together. As afternoon approaches, mist slowly lifts from the broad northern plains surrounding the settlement. Black pottery kilns become visible now, standing like rounded shadows against yellow earth beneath pale sunlight. Heat radiates softly from their surfaces, while artisans monitor temperatures through experience alone. A damaged kiln could ruin days of careful work without any possibility of customer support. The sounds throughout the settlement remain gentle and steady during the long afternoon hours. Stone tools tap rhythmically against wood, while grain pours softly into underground storage pits nearby. Children chase one another between homes as older villagers weave baskets beneath shaded walls. Daily life still revolves around harvest cycles, weather, and the practical demands of communal survival. Toward evening, cool wind moves once again across the open Shandong plains beneath fading sunlight. Smoke from cooking fires settles low across the village, while distant dogs bark somewhere beyond protective walls. The earth structures surrounding the settlement cast long shadows, suggesting these communities increasingly view themselves as permanent homes beside the shifting river landscape. Inside the homes, families gather around central fires, while polished black pottery reflects warm orange light against packed clay walls. Meals of millet, roots, and dried fish are shared quietly as conversations drift softly through the evening air. Nearby, a musician taps gently against a carved stone drum, producing slow echoes fading into darkness beyond the settlement. Archaeologists continue debating many aspects of Longshan society, even in modern times today. Some researchers see evidence of increasing conflict and political organization, while others emphasize continuity with earlier cooperative village traditions. The truth likely exists somewhere between both views, unfolding gradually across generations, too slow to recognize the transformation surrounding their daily lives. The stars appear one by one above the northern plains, while cool fog returns softly across the fields. Beneath the earth walls, beneath the smoke of pottery kilns and the quiet rhythm of distant drums, human society continues changing in subtle ways. Authority, craft specialization, ritual, and memory all deepen together, like roots spreading unseen beneath ancient soil. And as darkness settles gently across the Longshan settlements beside the Yellow River, the polished black vessels cool slowly beside fading fires, while the mist-covered plains carry forward the first quiet shadows of kingdoms still waiting far beyond the horizon of time. The centuries pass slowly across the Yellow River basin, and the climate of northern China begins to change in subtle but important ways. Around the second millennium before the Common Era, periods of dryness become more frequent across the plains and valleys surrounding the river. You feel the difference immediately in the air itself. The wind carries less moisture now, and the grasses across the plateau no longer grow as thick as before. Morning sunlight spreads weakly through pale autumn haze, while farmers cross brittle millet fields beneath quiet northern skies. The soil remains fertile, though seasons feel less predictable than earlier generations remember. Modern climate studies using pollen and lake sediments suggest repeated environmental fluctuations shape settlement patterns ancient villagers likely sense without fully understanding their causes. The Yellow River moves across the land with calm persistence beneath drifting clouds and fading sunlight. Rather than sudden disaster, many floods arrive gradually through rising water and shifting channels, reshaping familiar landscapes over time. Entire communities relocate because the river patiently rearranges geography year after year, like a neighbor endlessly moving furniture without permission. You stand beside a settlement where families prepare quietly to move toward more stable ground inland. Wooden tools, woven baskets, pottery vessels, and grain bundles are packed carefully onto simple carrying frames. Nobody appears panicked. These migrations unfold slowly across generations, teaching people beside the Yellow River that survival depends more upon flexibility than permanence. The riverbanks reveal constant change beneath layers of drifting yellow dust and autumn wind. Fresh silt settles across certain fields, while others disappear beneath newly carved channels, cutting through soft, loess soil. The Yellow River carries enormous sediment loads from the plateau, often appearing thick and golden beneath sunlight like flowing earth instead of water. As settlements expand across the Middle Yellow River region, populations gradually increase through generations of steady growth. Archaeologists discover evidence of larger villages, organized storage systems, and wider trade connections between communities. Growing populations place increasing pressure upon farmland, forests, hunting grounds, and water access, quietly shaping human relationships in more complicated ways. You walk along a narrow dirt path stretching between distant settlements beneath a dry autumn sky. Travelers carrying grain, stone tools, animal hides, and pottery move steadily across the plains, while dust rises softly beneath their feet. These simple roads form early networks connecting communities, proving civilization often begins through ordinary people sharing familiar paths. Some historians believe these growing interactions contribute to the formation of early political alliances among regional groups. Communities facing environmental pressure may cooperate more closely for trade, water management, defense, or seasonal migration. Leadership structures likely become more formal during these centuries, although still far removed from the powerful centralized dynasties that will emerge later beside the river. At midday, you pause beside a small encampment near a crossroads between settlements. Traders rest beneath woven shelters while exchanging goods gathered from distant regions. One family offers polished stone tools while another displays finely painted pottery carried from communities many days away. Nearby, someone roasts millet cakes over an open fire, producing an aroma that somehow feels both ancient and surprisingly comforting after long travel. The atmosphere remains calm despite these gradual transformations. People adapt because adaptation has always been part of life along the Yellow River. Older villagers share stories about previous floods, droughts, and migrations beside evening fires, reminding younger generations that the land itself is never completely still. In many ways, memory becomes as important as tools or grain reserves when navigating uncertain seasons. Far beyond the settlements, forests thin slowly across certain regions as communities gather increasing amounts of wood for homes, kilns, cooking fires, and defensive structures. Environmental historians studying ancient northern China suggest human activity already begins reshaping local ecosystems during this period. The changes remain subtle compared to modern industry, yet the relationship between people and landscape grows steadily more interconnected. Toward evening, cold wind drifts once more from the northwest while dust settles softly across the plains. The small roads connecting villages become more visible beneath the fading light, winding gently through fields and low hills toward distant clusters of smoke rising from hidden settlements. These pathways carry not only goods, but stories, rituals, farming methods, and shared knowledge between communities, slowly becoming part of a wider cultural world. Inside the villages, daily routines continue despite changing environmental conditions surrounding the settlements. Women repair woven baskets beside outdoor fires, while children carry water from clay-lined wells nearby. Older craftsmen sharpen tools and shape pottery beneath simple shelters. Human beings possess a remarkable ability to normalize complexity whenever dinner still appears somewhere before nightfall. The Yellow River itself remains both provider and reminder. Its floods replenish soil while also erasing boundaries people attempt to establish beside its shifting banks. Unlike mountains or stone deserts, rivers refuse permanence. They move constantly, carrying memory downstream while rewriting the land beneath changing skies. You begin to understand why later Chinese philosophy often emphasizes balance, flexibility, and acceptance of natural cycles. Archaeological evidence from this era also reveals increasing differences between settlements. Certain communities grow larger and more fortified, while others remain small, agricultural villages scattered across the plains. Storage facilities expand in some regions, suggesting greater organizational control over food resources. These developments hint at emerging centers of influence, slowly forming within the broader network of Yellow River cultures. Night falls gradually across the northern landscape. Fires flicker behind earthen walls, while distant travelers continue moving along dusty roads beneath the stars. Somewhere nearby, dogs bark softly at approaching strangers before settling once again into silence. The sounds of human life remain small compared to the vastness of wind, river, and open sky surrounding these early communities. As you rest beside the water, the current brushes steadily against the muddy banks under pale moonlight. The river does not hurry, and neither does history. Generations adapt quietly to environmental change, while alliances form almost invisibly through repeated cooperation and shared necessity. No single moment announces the beginning of political transformation across the Yellow River Basin. And beneath the drifting autumn dust, where narrow roads now connect villages across the ancient plains, the slow movement of people, climate, and water continues guiding northern China toward the first distant outlines of organized power waiting patiently beyond the horizon. The morning mist hangs low across the middle reaches of the Yellow River as you enter a world balanced delicately between memory and legend. Generations have passed since the quiet farming villages of earlier centuries, and now larger centers begin rising beside the fertile plains. Somewhere within these changing landscapes, Chinese tradition later places the Xia dynasty, a kingdom suspended gently between mythology and recorded history. For centuries, scholars debate whether the Xia truly exists as described in ancient texts. Early historical records written long after the period speak of wise rulers, floods, irrigation systems, and hereditary kingship emerging beside the Yellow River. Yet archaeology remains cautious, moving carefully through layers of evidence the way someone tests thin ice during late winter, hoping not to embarrass themselves in front of future historians. You travel through valleys softened by morning fog, where narrow paths connect scattered settlements to larger regional centers. Along these roads, messengers walk steadily beneath woven cloaks carrying grain, carved tablets, polished tools, and spoken instructions preserved through memory. Communication moves slowly here, yet it stretches farther across the landscape than ever before. One messenger pauses beside a narrow stream to rest after several long days traveling between settlements. He carries millet seeds wrapped carefully in cloth beside ceremonial objects intended for a distant community. Information travels slowly through this ancient world, yet it never truly stops. Stories and knowledge drift between villages like smoke crossing the plains. At the center of this changing landscape stands Erlitou near modern Luoyang in Henan province today. Excavations uncover rammed earth foundations, elite burial sites, workshops, turquoise artifacts, and some of China's earliest bronze objects. Many researchers associate Erlitou with cultural memories of the Xia dynasty, although certainty remains comfortably beyond complete historical reach. You walk across the remains of what appears to be a large palace complex, overlooking nearby settlements. Wide courtyards and carefully planned structures suggest organized authority, unlike earlier villages from previous centuries. The scale feels intentional. Someone already understands how architecture shapes perception, encouraging respect, obedience, and unusually careful posture during formal official gatherings. The palace foundations rest solidly beneath your feet, constructed from layers of compacted earth built with impressive precision. Workers must have carried enormous quantities of soil while coordinating labor over long periods of time. Large projects like these imply leadership capable of organizing communities beyond immediate family networks. Civilization advances gradually, yet eventually someone always volunteers everyone else for ambitious construction projects. Nearby workshops reveal bronze casting techniques still developing beside glowing furnaces and clay molds. Craftsmen control heat carefully while charcoal burns near storage pits filled with raw materials. Bronze remains rare during this period, valued for both ceremony and prestige. Transforming stone-like ore into shining metal must seem almost magical to early observers nearby. As evening approaches, artisans lift newly cast bronze vessels from cooling molds while firelight flickers across their unfinished surfaces. The metal reflects dim orange light in trembling patterns resembling distant stars floating upon dark water. You can almost understand why ancient societies often connect metallurgy with ritual power, cosmic order, and communication with unseen realms beyond ordinary experience. The settlements surrounding Erlitou feel increasingly layered in social complexity. Certain homes appear larger and more carefully constructed than others. Workshops cluster near elite compounds, while storage facilities suggest centralized control over resources and distribution. Archaeologists studying burial patterns also note differences in grave goods between individuals, indicating growing distinctions in status within the community. Yet daily life for ordinary people still revolves around familiar rhythms beside the Yellow River. Farmers tend millet fields beneath pale skies, while children carry water from wells lined with packed clay. Potters shape vessels beside open courtyards, and fishermen repair nets near quiet riverbanks. History often remembers kings first, but most civilizations continue functioning because countless unnamed people quietly maintain ordinary routines. You pass a group of travelers gathered beside a roadside fire beneath the cooling night sky. One man recites stories about Yu the Great, the legendary flood controller associated with the Shia dynasty in later tradition. According to ancient accounts, Yu earns authority not through conquest alone, but through tireless labor managing dangerous waters across the land. Whether entirely historical or partly symbolic, the story reflects deep cultural respect for harmony between governance and nature. The Yellow River itself continues shaping everything around it. Floods still alter fields and settlements, while fertile silt nourishes expanding populations along its banks. Control over water increasingly becomes linked to political legitimacy because communities depend on organized labor to maintain irrigation systems and protect valuable farmland. Even in the earliest states, infrastructure quietly becomes one of the foundations of authority. Inside the larger settlements, ceremonial spaces begin playing more visible roles within community life. Fires burn beside raised platforms where rituals honoring ancestors likely unfold beneath the stars. Bronze vessels, jade ornaments, and carved objects appear during important gatherings linking political leadership with spiritual tradition. The separation between government, religion, and social order remains beautifully blurred in this early world. Toward midnight, the settlements grow quieter beneath drifting fog. Fires burn low behind palace walls, while guards walk slowly along packed earth pathways, carrying simple torches against the darkness. Somewhere in the distance, a bronze bell rings softly through the cool air before fading once again into silence. The sound feels strangely calming, like hearing a distant train late at night from the safety of bed. Modern archaeology continues uncovering new information about Erlitou and the surrounding societies beside the Yellow River. Researchers still debate the exact relationship between these discoveries and the legendary Shia dynasty described within ancient texts. Regardless of labels, the evidence reveals complex regional centers already flourishing and shaping political traditions lasting thousands of years afterward. You stand once more beside the riverbank, where moonlight reflects softly across moving water. The current carries yellow sediment eastward beneath silent stars, while the settlements sleep behind their walls and courtyards. Bronze cools beside fading furnaces. Messengers rest beside roadside fires. Stories travel quietly from village to village, through valleys wrapped in mist. And somewhere between legend and history, beneath the dim glow of firelight trembling across unfinished bronze, the first shadows of kings begin slowly taking shape beside the endless waters of the Yellow River. The northern plains feel colder now as centuries continue unfolding beside the Yellow River. Mist drifts low across harvested fields, while larger cities rise beyond the horizon under the rule of the Shang dynasty. You enter a world where bronze glows beside temple fires, where kings consult ancestors through cracks in heated bone, and where ritual slowly shapes the rhythm of political life across ancient northern China. The Shang dynasty emerges around the second millennium before the Common Era, building upon earlier traditions while expanding political authority across broad regions of the Yellow River Basin. Archaeological discoveries at sites like Yinshu, near modern Anyang, reveal one of the earliest fully developed Bronze Age civilizations in East Asia. Here, organized rulership, ceremonial systems, and advanced craftsmanship settle deeply into the foundations of society. As dawn spreads faint silver light across the plains, you walk through a workshop district where bronze casters begin their day beside glowing furnaces. Workers carry charcoal, clay molds, and copper ore between carefully arranged work areas, while smoke rises slowly into the cold air. The atmosphere feels focused rather than hurried. Precision matters deeply when creating ritual vessels that may outlive entire generations. Shang bronze casting techniques become extraordinarily sophisticated for the ancient world. Craftsmen use piece mold casting methods capable of producing massive ceremonial vessels decorated with intricate animal motifs and geometric patterns. Some bronzes weigh hundreds of kilograms and display remarkable artistic control. Even today, archaeologists remain astonished by the technical skill involved, especially considering nobody here has access to industrial machinery or online tutorial videos. Inside one workshop, molten bronze glows bright orange beneath the dim interior light. Craftsmen pour liquid metal carefully into assembled molds, while assistants monitor airflow around the furnaces. The sound resembles steady breathing mixed with distant thunder. Nearby, completed vessels cool slowly beside stone floors, their surfaces covered with carved, towdy masks whose mysterious expressions continue puzzling historians thousands of years later. Beyond the workshops rise the ceremonial compounds and royal tombs of Yinshu, the final capital of the Shang dynasty. Excavations beginning in the 20th century uncover enormous burial chambers filled with bronze vessels, jade ornaments, chariots, weapons, and sacrificial offerings. Some tombs descend deep into the earth beneath sloping ramps, creating spaces designed not only for burial, but also for preserving ritual authority beyond death itself. You stand beside one of the great bronze ding vessels buried with Shang nobles. Its heavy form rests silently beneath layers of ancient earth, decorated with complex patterns reflecting both artistic imagination and spiritual symbolism. These vessels are not simple containers. They function as ritual objects tied closely to feasting ceremonies, ancestral worship, and political legitimacy within Shang society. Many Shang rulers believe communication with ancestors guides the stability of the kingdom. To seek guidance, royal diviners heat oracle bones made from ox scapulae or turtle shells until cracks form across their surfaces. Questions about harvests, warfare, weather, childbirth, and eclipses are carved beside these fractures. The earliest known Chinese writing appears through this remarkable practice of seeking order within uncertainty. You watch a diviner preparing an oracle bone beneath flickering firelight inside a ceremonial hall. The atmosphere remains calm and deliberate while attendants kneel nearby holding carved tools and bundles of dried reeds. The king asks whether rain will arrive in time for planting. The cracks spreading across the heated bone become interpreted as answers from ancestral spirits who continue watching over the living world. Archaeologists discover thousands of oracle bone inscriptions at Yinshu, preserving extraordinary glimpses into Shang life. Some records mention eclipses and astronomical observations with surprising accuracy. Others describe harvest conditions, hunting expeditions, illnesses, military campaigns, and ritual offerings. Together, these fragments reveal a society deeply concerned with maintaining harmony between political authority, natural cycles, and unseen spiritual forces. Outside the ceremonial compounds, ordinary life continues quietly beneath the broad northern sky. Farmers harvest millet from cold autumn fields, while craftsmen shape tools from bone and stone beside village workshops. Children chase dogs through narrow streets lined with packed earth walls. Even during the rise of complex kingdoms, daily survival still depends largely on weather, labor, and community cooperation. The Shang also develop impressive urban planning and transportation systems connecting settlements across the region. Roads become more established, while horse-drawn chariots appear among elite military and ceremonial classes. Bronze weapons and organized armies strengthen royal influence over neighboring territories. Yet despite these growing structures of power, the atmosphere beside the Yellow River still feels tied closely to seasonal rhythms and agricultural life. Toward evening, smoke gathers slowly above the city, while temple fires flicker beneath darkening northern skies and drifting autumn wind. Priests prepare ritual offerings within ceremonial courtyards, surrounded by bronze vessels, bells, and drums glowing softly beside the firelight. In Shang society, music carries deep spiritual meaning, helping maintain harmony between rulers, ancestors, heaven, earth, and unseen forces beyond human understanding. Then, slowly, the ceremonial drums begin echoing outward across the cold northern plains beyond the distant city walls tonight. Their deep rhythm moves through the dark air in calm, measured intervals without violence, urgency, or triumph. Instead, the sound feels strangely comforting, like a heartbeat stretched across enormous distances, while distant farmers hear faint echoes beside evening fires. You stand beneath the stars while the music drifts across harvested fields silvered by moonlight. The plains themselves seem to listen. Wind moves through dry grass beside the river, while smoke rises from distant homes scattered across the valley. In moments like this, the entire kingdom feels connected through sound, ritual, memory, and shared awareness of forces larger than individual lives. Inside the royal tombs, bronze vessels rest silently beside the dead, beneath heavy layers of earth untouched for thousands of years. Oracle bones remain buried beneath collapsed halls, where kings once searched endlessly for certainty within shifting patterns of weather and fate. Human beings everywhere seek reassurance against uncertainty, though history gently suggests nobody completely solves the problem. As midnight deepens across the Yellow River plains beneath cold stars and drifting autumn wind, the slow ceremonial drums continue echoing softly through the darkness beyond distant walls and sleeping fields. Their rhythm gradually fades into silence, leaving only the river, the ancient earth, and the endless northern night stretching quietly beneath the stars above. The cold northern wind moves gently across the plains as another long age begins beside the Yellow River. The Shang kings fade gradually into history, and the Zhou dynasty rises in their place during the 11th century before the Common Era. Yet this transition is remembered not only through battles or changing rulers, but through a quieter and more enduring idea known as the Mandate of Heaven. You travel along a broad dirt road stretching westward beneath a pale winter sky. Wooden chariots roll slowly across the frozen earth, while horses breathe clouds of steam into the cold afternoon air. Messengers, officials, and traveling scholars move carefully between regional courts scattered across the expanding Zhao world. The roads feel calmer than battlefields, shaped more by administration and ritual than conquest alone. According to Zhou philosophy, political authority does not belong permanently to one family or kingdom. Instead, heaven grants legitimacy to rulers who govern with balance, responsibility, and moral order. If corruption, chaos, or suffering spread across the land, heaven may withdraw its support and allow another dynasty to rise. Power becomes something temporary and seasonal, flowing through history, much like rivers moving across the plains. This idea changes Chinese political thought for thousands of years. The Mandate of Heaven offers a moral explanation for dynastic change without completely destroying respect for cosmic order. A failing ruler does not simply lose a war, he loses harmony with the universe itself. In a strangely practical way, it becomes one of history's earliest performance reviews, although the consequences remain considerably more dramatic than an uncomfortable office meeting. You arrive at a regional Zhao settlement protected by low earth walls and organized around ceremonial courtyards. The atmosphere feels disciplined but not oppressive. Officials record grain storage levels, while craftsmen repair bronze tools beside open workshops. Farmers continue harvesting millet and wheat from nearby fields, their routines unfolding beneath the same seasonal rhythms that shaped life along the Yellow River for countless generations. The Zhou rulers governed through a decentralized network of allied states and noble families. Lands are distributed among regional lords who maintain loyalty to the Zhou king while overseeing local administration, agriculture, and defense. Historians often compare this arrangement loosely to feudal systems that later appear elsewhere in the world, although Zhou society develops according to its own distinct cultural traditions and rituals. You watch a group of noble riders departing towards southern territories, newly incorporated into the Zhao sphere of influence. Their chariots move steadily along packed earth roads, bordered by winter grass and bare trees. Expansion during the Western Zhou period gradually carries political influence farther west and south, connecting diverse communities through shared ceremonies, trade systems, and administrative relationships. As evening approaches, you enter a ceremonial complex where preparations are underway for ancestral rites beneath the darkening sky. Bronze bells hang from wooden frames, while attendants arrange offerings beside stone altars, polished smooth by generations of use. Ritual remains central to Zhou political culture because harmony between rulers, ancestors, and heaven is believed essential for maintaining social stability across the kingdom. Then the bells begin to sound. The tones rise slowly into the cold air, deep and resonant beneath the silver-gray clouds of late afternoon. Each note lingers across the courtyards before fading gently into silence. Unlike drums that echo with earthly rhythm, these bronze bells feel almost weightless, as though the sound itself is searching quietly for something beyond the visible world. Bronze craftsmanship continues flourishing during the Zhou dynasty, although ceremonial styles gradually evolve from Shang traditions. Ritual vessels often carry long inscriptions recording political events, royal gifts, alliances, and acts of devotion. These inscriptions become increasingly valuable to historians because they preserve direct glimpses into early Chinese governance, belief systems, and social organization during the first millennium before the Common Era. Inside the ceremonial halls, scribes carefully copy records onto bamboo strips tied together with cord. Writing systems grow more standardized as administrative complexity expands across Zhao territories. Education and ritual knowledge become important tools for governance, shaping the foundations of later Chinese intellectual traditions. Somewhere nearby, a tired apprentice undoubtedly wishes invention of paper could happen slightly sooner. Beyond the courts and temples, ordinary village life remains familiar, despite changing political structures. Families repair tools beside winter fires, while children gather water from frozen wells lined with packed earth. Farmers discuss weather patterns and harvest conditions beneath cloudy skies. Even great philosophical ideas must eventually coexist with practical concerns like cracked roofs, stubborn animals, and whether enough grain survives until spring. The Zhou period also witnesses important advances in agriculture and infrastructure. Iron tools begin appearing gradually during later centuries, improving farming efficiency across many regions. Irrigation systems expand, while roads connecting major settlements become increasingly organized. These developments support larger populations and more stable food production throughout parts of northern China, allowing cities and administrative centers to grow steadily over time. As night falls across the plains, smoke rises softly from countless homes scattered beside rivers and valleys. Travelers continue moving along the roads beneath flickering torchlight, while distant bells echo faintly from temple courtyards hidden beyond the hills. The entire landscape feels connected through ritual, memory, and the shared belief that order exists somewhere within the changing patterns of the world. The mandate of heaven offers comfort partly because it treats history as cyclical rather than chaotic. Dynasties rise and decline like seasons moving through endless repetition. No kingdom remains permanent, yet neither does disorder. The universe itself appears governed by balance, renewal, and gradual transformation. In uncertain times, such ideas must have felt deeply reassuring beside the shifting waters of the Yellow River. You stand quietly at the edge of a ceremonial courtyard while the final bronze bell resonates into the cold evening air. Snow clouds gather faintly beyond the western hills while horses rest beside silent chariots near the road. The priests extinguish ritual fires one by one, leaving only drifting smoke beneath the stars. And under the vast northern heavens, where kingdoms rise and fade according to rhythms older than memory, the Zhou world settles gently into the long breathing cycles of history, guided by the quiet belief that all power eventually returns to the endless order of the sky above. The centuries continue unfolding beside the Yellow River, while the world grows steadily more crowded with voices, footsteps, trade, and distant ambitions. During the spring and autumn period, ancient Chinese cities expand beyond ceremonial centers into busy settlements filled with merchants, bronze workers, scribes, travelers, and wandering philosophers. Yet beneath these transformations, ordinary life still follows the gentle rhythm of seasons, harvests, and familiar soil. You enter one of these growing cities through a gate built from packed earth and timber darkened by years of wind and smoke. Guards wrapped in layered cloth stand quietly beside the entrance while carts creak slowly along narrow streets carrying grain, salt, pottery, and bundles of firewood. Dust rises softly beneath passing wheels, hanging in pale sunlight like drifting flowers suspended above an old kitchen floor. The city smells of many things at once. Smoke from cooking fires mixes with the scent of damp clay, drying leather, horse sweat, and fresh-cut millet stalks brought in from nearby villages. Somewhere nearby, a bronze workshop glows orange behind half-open doors, while hammering echoes softly across the narrow streets. The atmosphere feels busy, yet never rushed in the frantic modern sense of the word. Trade routes along the Yellow River continue expanding during this era, connecting settlements across increasingly large distances. Boats carry salt, grain, jade, lacquerware, and rough silk fibers between regions, while caravans move carefully across dusty roads linking inland states. These early exchange networks do more than transport goods. They also carry songs, dialects, rituals, recipes, and unfamiliar customs from one valley to another. You pass a merchant arranging polished jade ornaments upon woven cloth beneath a shaded awning near the market square. Beside him, another trader displays rolls of coarse silk shimmering softly in the afternoon light. Silk production already exists in China for centuries by this time, though much of it remains reserved for elites and ceremonial use. Even unfinished silk catches light beautifully, like water moving quietly beneath sunlight. Nearby, scribes sit cross-legged beside wooden tables, copying records onto bamboo strips tied together with cord. Administrative systems grow steadily more complex during the later Zhou centuries as regional states compete for influence and territory. Literacy remains limited to educated classes, yet written records increasingly shape taxation, diplomacy, law, and historical memory throughout the expanding political world. One young apprentice struggles carefully with his brush, while an older scribe watches nearby with visible patience. The boy pauses repeatedly to correct crooked characters before continuing his work beneath the fading daylight. In every civilization, there is always someone quietly discovering that handwriting becomes unexpectedly important at the exact moment mistakes become permanent. Beyond the city walls, however, the countryside changes more slowly. Farmers still rise before dawn to tend millet and wheat beneath pale northern skies. Seasonal floods continue enriching the soil, while irrigation systems expand gradually across cultivated land. Despite the political rivalries developing between regional states, most ordinary people remain deeply connected to agricultural rhythms that feel timeless beside the river. Historians refer to this era as the Spring and Autumn period, because later chronicles describe the political rise and decline of numerous competing states across ancient China. Alliances shift regularly. Courts negotiate marriages, treaties, and military campaigns, while rulers seek greater authority over neighboring territories. Yet even during these transformations, daily existence for most families continues revolving around planting, harvesting, cooking, and surviving winter cold. As afternoon fades toward evening, the market streets grow quieter. Merchants pack away goods beneath linen coverings, while bronze workers extinguish furnaces glowing dimly behind workshop walls. Children chase one another through narrow alleyways lined with storage jars and woven baskets. The city exhales slowly after the long business of daylight hours, settling into softer rhythms beneath gathering dusk. You wander toward the outer neighborhoods where simpler homes cluster near the old earth walls surrounding the city. Many structures remain built from packed clay and timber, with roofs thatched from straw or reeds gathered beside nearby rivers. Thin linen curtains hang across doorways, while small oil lamps flicker softly within darkening interiors. The atmosphere feels humble, warm, and deeply human. Inside one home, a family shares an evening meal beside a low wooden table illuminated by trembling lamplight. Steam rises gently from bowls of millet porridge while an older woman repairs woven sandals near the fire. Outside, cold wind brushes dust against the walls, while distant voices drift through the narrow lanes. The scene could almost belong to any century shaped more by routine than by fame. Meanwhile, philosophical ideas begin spreading quietly through the states during this remarkable age of intellectual development. Teachers and scholars travel between courts discussing ethics, governance, ritual, music, and the proper balance between authority and virtue. Confucius himself will later walk roads much like these, searching patiently for rulers willing to govern through moral example rather than fear alone. The roads connecting cities continue growing busier with traders, officials, and wandering thinkers carrying knowledge between regions. Inns appear beside major routes, where travelers rest beside communal fires while exchanging stories gathered from distant territories. Some roads remain muddy and uneven, especially after rainstorms, proving once again that infrastructure complaints remain one of humanity's oldest shared traditions. As darkness deepens, musicians begin playing softly within courtyards, hidden behind timber gates. The sounds of stringed instruments and bronze bells drift faintly across the sleeping city, while smoke rises from countless evening fires into the cold night air. Somewhere nearby, a dog barks once before settling again beside a doorway warmed by fading embers. You climb slowly onto a section of the old earth wall, overlooking both city and countryside beneath the stars. Beyond the lantern glow, the yellow river reflects pale moonlight as it winds silently through distant fields and villages. Despite the growing complexity of courts and commerce, the river itself remains unchanged in spirit, carrying water and memory steadily eastward through every generation. The competing states of the spring and autumn era will gradually reshape the political landscape of ancient China, guiding the region toward even greater transformations in centuries ahead. Yet tonight, beneath oil lamps glowing softly behind linen curtains, life still feels suspended between old village customs and the first quiet shadows of empire, while merchants, scribes, and sleeping cities settle peacefully beneath the endless northern sky. The centuries drift onward beside the Yellow River, and the old Zhou world slowly transforms into something larger, heavier, and far more organized than before. The era known as the Warring States period emerges not from one sudden collapse, but from generations of political division, administrative reform, and expanding ambition. Kingdoms sharpen themselves gradually like blades worn smooth through long and patient use. You travel now through a landscape filled with fortified cities, military roads, and carefully managed farmland stretching across the northern plains. Yet despite the growing machinery of states and armies, the morning still begins quietly beside the river. Frost gathers along wheat fields while smoke rises gently from village fires beneath pale gray skies touched by the first light of dawn. The competing states of Chu, Zhao, Wei, Han, Qi, and Yan each seek stability, security, and influence during these long centuries of rivalry. Rulers reorganize taxation systems, strengthen legal codes, and expand bureaucratic administration across their territories. Government becomes increasingly structured and practical, shaped less by hereditary ritual alone and more by efficiency, discipline, and careful control over land and labor. You walk beside a wide irrigation canal carved carefully across the countryside. Water flows steadily through the channel toward distant fields of millet and wheat, shimmering beneath the morning sun. Massive hydraulic projects become essential during this era because growing populations require reliable agriculture, capable of supporting large armies, expanding cities, and increasingly centralized governments throughout northern China. One of the most remarkable engineering achievements appears in the state of Qin, where irrigation systems such as the Zhenguo Canal transform large areas of farmland into productive agricultural regions. Workers dig channels across enormous distances while officials supervise labor, measurements, and water distribution. These projects require extraordinary coordination, proving that infrastructure often becomes one of the quiet foundations upon which empires eventually rise. The canal water moves calmly beside the road, while farmers guide oxen through damp fields nearby. Children carry baskets of seed grain, while older villagers repair wooden tools beneath woven shelters. Even as kingdoms compete for dominance, ordinary life continues revolving around harvest cycles, weather patterns, and practical routines repeated across countless generations. History changes overhead, while daily survival remains close to the earth itself. As afternoon approaches, you enter a busy frontier town where merchants, soldiers, and administrators gather beside crowded markets and storage compounds. Standardized bronze coins pass between traders purchasing grain, salt, cloth, and iron tools. Ironworking expands significantly during the Warring States period, improving agricultural efficiency while also strengthening weapons and military equipment across the competing kingdoms. Inside one workshop, blacksmiths hammer glowing iron beneath showers of sparks while apprentices pump bellows beside roaring furnaces. The rhythm feels steady rather than chaotic, almost musical in its repetition. Somewhere nearby, a tired worker wipes sweat from his face and silently invents the universal human dream of someday sitting down for a very long nap. The state of Qin gradually becomes one of the most powerful kingdoms through military organization, agricultural reform, and highly centralized administration. Legalist philosophy influences Qin governance strongly, emphasizing order, discipline, standardized law, and practical state control over hereditary privilege. These policies often appear harsh, yet they also create remarkable administrative efficiency compared to many rival states fragmented by older aristocratic traditions. Roads expand across the Qin territories in careful straight lines designed for rapid communication and troop movement. Messengers travel efficiently between regional centers, while officials maintain detailed records using increasingly standardized systems of writing and measurement. The world begins feeling smaller beneath this growing administrative network, as though scattered regions are slowly being stitched together by invisible threads of bureaucracy. Then, in 221 BCE, the Qin kingdom finally unifies much of China under the rule of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor. After centuries of political division and warfare, numerous states become incorporated into a single imperial system stretching across vast territories. The transition reshapes Chinese history permanently, establishing patterns of centralized governance that influence future dynasties for more than 2,000 years. You travel along one of the newly regulated imperial roads beneath a cold autumn sky. Distances are now measured according to standardized units, while official documents use unified writing systems across different regions. Wheel axles are standardized so carts fit properly within shared road widths. It is strangely comforting to realize that even ancient empires eventually become concerned with transportation logistics and consistent paperwork. The roads feel quieter now under unified Qin administration across the newly connected lands. Border checkpoints between rival states disappear, allowing trade to flow more smoothly. Merchants travel farther using shared laws and systems, while the silence along the roads reflects the vast authority of the empire watching over its expanding world carefully. Massive construction projects spread across the empire under Qin rule. Early defensive walls begin linking northern fortifications, forming foundations that later generations will call the Great Wall. Palaces rise near administrative centers, while canals and roads extend into countryside. These works rely heavily on ordinary labor tied closely to imperial expansion needs. Beyond roads and walls, the Yellow River continues its ancient movement across the plains. It flows steadily through shifting landscapes, indifferent to borders or rulers. Its waters carry memory of earlier eras, reminding that beneath every system of control, natural rhythms persist quietly, shaping the land long before empires ever appear. The river does not recognize dynasties or political reforms. It carries yellow sediment eastward exactly as it did long before emperors standardized writing or measured roads with official precision. Floods still arrive according to weather and geography rather than imperial decree. Farmers still study the sky before planting crops beside the water's shifting banks. Night settles slowly across the Qin Empire, while lanterns flicker beside government stations and roadside inns. Soldiers rest beside their horses while officials seal bamboo documents beneath dim firelight. Far away, irrigation canals reflect the moon like narrow ribbons of silver crossing the dark countryside. The machinery of empire hums quietly beneath the enormous northern sky. And beneath all the authority, all the roads, all the laws and measurements carefully imposed across the land, the Yellow River continues flowing through history with calm and patient indifference, carrying the same ancient waters onward, beneath stars that remain older than every kingdom ever built beside its shores. The great dynasties rise beside the Yellow River, and in time they begin to fade like smoke, dissolving quietly into the northern sky. Yet the older worlds beneath them do not disappear completely. Customs, habits, songs, farming rituals, and quiet ways of living continue flowing gently through generations, blending themselves into new societies so naturally that few people even notice the ancient echoes surrounding them. You walk now through the remains of an old walled settlement long after its political importance has faded. Sections of rammed earth fortifications crumble softly beneath wind and rain, while pale grass grows between ancient stones warmed by centuries of sunlight. The city no longer commands armies or receives royal envoys, yet traces of human life still linger carefully inside every weathered surface. Morning light spills slowly across abandoned courtyards where broken roof tiles rest beneath climbing vines. Birds nest within cracked gate towers, while narrow footpaths cut through forgotten administrative compounds once filled with scribes and officials. History often leaves behind grand names in books, but physical places age much more quietly, settling back into the landscape one season at a time. Modern sociologists and anthropologists studying villages near the Yellow River notice something remarkable. Many local customs practiced well into recent centuries appear connected to traditions far older than imperial records themselves. Seasonal festivals, ancestor rituals, communal farming habits, and village storytelling patterns sometimes preserve echoes of tribal structures that may reach back thousands of years into prehistoric northern China. You arrive at a small farming village built near the ruins of older walls darkened by age and moss. Smoke rises gently from kitchen fires, while elderly residents sweep dust from stone thresholds beneath hanging bundles of dried herbs. Children run along narrow paths between houses without paying much attention to the ancient ruins beside them. To those who grow up here, the past simply becomes part of the scenery. Near the village center, a wooden water wheel turns slowly beside a narrow irrigation channel fed by the distant river. The steady creaking sound mixes with flowing water and rustling reeds beneath the afternoon breeze. Similar water management systems support agriculture across northern China for centuries, linking later dynastic communities to much older traditions of cooperation beside the unpredictable currents of the Yellow River. An old farmer pauses beside the wheel to adjust a worn wooden beam polished smooth by generations of hands. He works patiently while ducks drift through shallow water under a pale sky. In every century, someone quietly repairs what others assume will always function. Inside homes, life follows ancient agricultural rhythms. Families dry grain beneath open courtyards, while older women weave baskets from reeds gathered near the riverbanks. Meals simmer slowly over clay stoves, blackened by years of smoke. Although dynasties change repeatedly across history, the ordinary structure of village life often remains remarkably consistent beside the northern plains. You notice how older beliefs continue blending naturally with newer traditions throughout the region. Ancestral tablets rest beside folk charms, protecting homes from misfortune. Seasonal offerings appear near wells and field edges during planting festivals. Some rituals officially belong to organized philosophies or religions, while others seem older and harder to define, surviving quietly because communities continue repeating them year after year. As evening approaches, the village grows calmer beneath fading sunlight. Goats wander slowly back toward enclosed yards, while smoke from cooking fires settles low across the ancient stone walls nearby. Crickets begin singing softly beneath wild grass growing through cracks in old foundations. The atmosphere feels deeply layered, as though many centuries continue existing together at once beneath the same fading sky. You climb carefully onto a weathered section of wall overlooking both the village and the distant river plains beyond. The bricks beneath your hands feel warm from the afternoon sun despite their immense age. Moss spreads slowly between cracks, while tiny flowers emerge unexpectedly from narrow gaps in the stone. Nature reclaims old structures gradually, not through violence, but through endless patient repetition. Far away, the Yellow River still winds through the northern landscape, carrying sediment from the plateau toward the eastern sea. Floods continue reshaping fields while villages adapt and rebuild according to familiar patterns learned long ago. Even after empires rise and collapse, the relationship between river, soil, and human survival remains one of the deepest constants within this ancient world. Historians often focus on emperors, battles, reforms, and political transitions, yet much of civilization survives through quieter continuity. Recipes pass between generations. Local songs remain unchanged for centuries. Techniques for repairing roofs, shaping pottery, or predicting seasonal weather persist long after official governments disappear. Human memory frequently survives best inside ordinary habits rather than monumental declarations. Night settles slowly over the village while lanterns glow behind paper windows, softened by drifting smoke. Somewhere nearby, an elderly storyteller speaks softly to children gathered around an indoor fire, recounting legends inherited from ancestors whose names have long faded from written records. The stories themselves shift slightly over time, but their emotional rhythm remains familiar beneath every retelling. A cool breeze moves across the old stone walls, while roof tiles click faintly in the darkness. Water continues flowing through the wooden wheel beside the irrigation channel, producing a calm, repetitive sound that seems almost hypnotic beneath the night insects. You realize the village itself feels less like a place frozen in history and more like a living conversation between generations. Even the ruins no longer appear abandoned. Grass, wind, insects, and human footsteps all coexist naturally among the old foundations. The walls continue standing not because they resist time forever, but because time slowly folds them into the surrounding landscape. In a strange way, decay itself becomes another form of continuity rather than an ending. The stars emerge quietly above the Yellow River Valley while distant dogs bark somewhere beyond the fields. Lantern light flickers softly behind ancient walls, now softened by centuries of weather and silence. The village settles gently toward sleep while cold northern air drifts across rooftops and forgotten courtyards beneath the moon. And through the sound of flowing water, creaking wood, and wind brushing softly across old roof tiles, the story beside the Yellow River continues whispering itself forward, never truly ending, only changing shape beneath the endless passing of time. The night deepens slowly above the Yellow River, and the long story of kingdoms, villages, rituals, and wandering generations begins settling gently to silence. You stand once more beside the moving water beneath an ancient sky where countless lives have appeared and disappeared across unimaginable stretches of time. The river continues onward calmly, carrying yellow earth eastward exactly as it has for millions of years. From the perspective of geology, every dynasty beside the Yellow River exists only briefly upon the surface of time. The Xia, Shang, Zhou, Qin, and all the countless communities between them rise like temporary patterns formed by wind across loose sand. Mountains lift and erode. Rivers shift their courses repeatedly. Entire civilizations occupy only the thinnest layer within the deeper memory of the earth itself. You look across the dark plains, where ancient capitals once stood behind walls of rammed earth and stone. Many of those cities now survive only as faint outlines beneath farmland, buried foundations beneath villages, or fragments of pottery resting silently underground. Archaeologists uncover them slowly, piece by piece, like listeners trying to reconstruct a forgotten melody from a few surviving notes carried across great distance. The Yellow River has changed course many times throughout history, sometimes gradually and sometimes with startling force. Sediment carried from the lowest plateau continues building unstable riverbeds prone to flooding and redirection across the northern plains. Even today, scientists study the river carefully because its relationship with human settlement remains as complicated and powerful as it was in the earliest villages thousands of years ago. You kneel beside the riverbank and let loose grains of yellow soil slip slowly through your fingers into the current below. This same sediment once nourishes millet fields, buries abandoned settlements, supports imperial capitals, and drifts eventually toward the distant sea. The material itself remains ancient beyond comprehension, traveling through endless cycles long before human beings ever attached names to kingdoms or rulers. Somewhere beneath nearby fields lie forgotten roads once traveled by merchants carrying jade, salt, bronze, silk, and written records between distant states. Elsewhere beneath layers of earth rest broken oracle bones, collapsed palace foundations, rusted tools, and fragments of painted pottery touched by hands separated from you by 4,000 years. Time preserves surprisingly little, yet somehow enough always remains for memory to continue breathing softly beneath the soil. The dynasties that once commanded enormous territories eventually dissolve into the same landscape from which they emerged. Administrative systems disappear, armies fade, palaces collapse. Yet the villages beside the river continue adapting quietly through each transformation. Farmers plant grain, children carry water, families gather beside evening fires. Human continuity survives less through empire than through ordinary repetition shared across generations. You walk slowly along the dark riverbank while cold night wind moves through dry grass beneath the stars. The current brushes gently against the muddy shore with a soft and repetitive sound that seems almost endless. No emperor ever fully controls this river. No political system completely reshapes the rhythms of water, weather, gravity, and geological time moving patiently beneath human history. Far upstream, fresh sediment still washes down from the Tibetan plateau where cold winds cross the highlands much as they did tens of thousands of years ago. Snow melts into streams. Streams join rivers. Rivers carry earth across the plains toward the sea. The cycle continues without ceremony, without announcement, and without concern for the rise or fall of kingdoms beside its banks. Modern researchers studying ancient climate patterns, archaeology, and hydrology continue uncovering new details about the civilizations that grow beside the Yellow River. Yet every discovery also deepens awareness of how much remains unknown. Entire communities vanish without written records. Languages disappear. Ritual meanings fade. Silence becomes part of the historical landscape itself, surrounding every surviving fragment with quiet mystery. You pause near the remains of an old stone wall, barely visible beneath climbing grass and moonlit shadows. The wall once marked boundaries considered important enough to defend with labor, law, and sacrifice. Now insects move freely through the cracks, while vines spread patiently across the ancient surface. Nature does not erase history violently. More often, it simply continues growing around it. Above you, the night sky stretches endlessly beyond the reach of dynasties and calendars. Ancient farmers, bronze workers, kings, scribes, and wandering travelers all once looked upward toward these same stars while wondering about floods, harvests, ancestors, and the uncertain future. Human concerns change surprisingly little across the centuries, even as entire civilizations rise and disappear beneath shifting skies. The sound of water grows softer as midnight deepens across the northern plains. Wind brushes carefully across reeds near the shore, while distant owls call from somewhere beyond the darkened fields. The atmosphere feels suspended between wakefulness and dreaming, as though the land itself has begun resting after carrying the weight of so many generations through history. You begin noticing how gently the story has always moved. Even wars, reforms, and dynastic transitions unfold slowly when viewed across geological time. The river remains patient. The earth remains patient. Human beings arrive briefly beside the water, build homes and kingdoms, leave behind traces of memory, and then return quietly to the soil from which everything first emerged. The old roads are gone now beneath newer paths and changing landscapes. The ceremonial bells have long since fallen silent. Bronze vessels rest in museums or beneath forgotten earth. Yet the river continues carrying moonlight across its surface beneath the same endless movement that shaped the first villages beside its banks so many thousands of years ago. And as the story drifts toward its final quiet moments, the world itself seems to grow softer around you. The cold air settles gently across the plains. The stars blur faintly behind distant mist. Water touches the dark shore again and again with calm, patient rhythm, like breathing that has continued since before history learned how to speak. Now there is almost nothing left except the sound of the river beneath the ancient night sky. Only the faint current moving through darkness. Only the soft wind crossing the northern earth. Only the endless water carrying yellow soil toward the sea beneath stars without beginning or end. The script comes to a close. Thank you all for listening.